Hey everybody, it's Scott and welcome to this week's episode of Strength and Health TV. I'm really excited about this week's episode because I'm here with my good friend and teammate on Plantbuilt, Erin Fergus. Erin, thanks so much for coming all the way down here just to be on the episode.
Okay, if we're real talking here, I was promised some Revolution donuts. They're sitting over there.
There may be donuts.
Be going with me, and there just happened to be a video camera and some chairs, and I figured we'd sit down and talk. So
it's all for the donuts. There you go. That's all it takes. So anyway, thanks a lot for being here. And again, Erin's one of my friends and teammates on Plantbuilt. So Erin, why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself to everybody?
Okay, so my full name is Erin Fergus. I live in Greenville, South Carolina. I was actually down visiting my family in Enterprise, Alabama, and Atlanta's kind of on the way back home, so I figured I'd stop through. I teach personal training at Greenville Technical College in Greenville, South Carolina, and my education background is in exercise science, and I've been teaching there for, I think my 3-year anniversary is this coming January. So before that, I lived in Pensacola, Florida for about 11 years, and my fitness background before I got into bodybuilding was more endurance style because in the panhandle of Florida, endurance sports are really popular, long distance running, triathlon, that kind of thing. Lifted weights because I worked at a Y, I did personal training, fitness director, that kind of thing, but wasn't really serious into my strength training until about May 2013.
Cool, awesome. So I know that you've been vegan, for a few years now and stuff, but what was the evolution? What got you interested in, vegetarian and eventually vegan nutrition and lifestyle? Where did it all start?
So I grew up, like I said, in Enterprise, Alabama, where my parents live, and my parents both are very nature, outdoor, and animal oriented. So they grew up with horses, and we lived kind of, not really on a farm, but we had some acres. And with the horses, if you buy horse feed, they do this like Easter, 10 chickens, bag of feed, that kind of thing. So we were like, hey, pet chicks, whatever, we'll see what happens. They'll eat the bugs. And we kind of went from there. So then it was like each pet chicken had a name, and each pet chicken got hugged and loved and all that kind of stuff. And all the while I'm eating chicken for dinner, whatever, because my mom was serving it. And we went to Washington D.C. right after I graduated high school, and that was the first time I had seen PETA. Like, had never seen it before, didn't know what it was. Kind of saw the ads where they had the cow right behind the bars. I don't know if people have seen that one, but just and it was kind of like, boom, chicken pets. Chicken for food, what's the difference, and so I literally the next day was like, okay, mom and dad, I'm gonna be vegetarian, and this was in 2001, and it pretty much was a cold turkey kind of thing, and it stuck. And my mom was like, that's funny because you always grew up taking the meat patty out of the Whopper Jr., you just wanted like a Whopper Jr. without the Whopper, so like right when I said it, they were like, oh, that totally makes sense. And so it was pretty easy to be vegetarian in Pensacola, Florida, where I went to college, but not quite easy enough to be vegan. So I was kind of one of those like transitioning closer to being plant-based at home, but still did the eating cheese and dairy when I was out kind of thing. And then I got into recycling and kind of got more of the environmental part going, probably around 2007. I think I phased out eggs then. And it wasn't until March 2013 when I was in Greenville for a couple months that I had been encouraged to actually start bodybuilding, and I thought like, okay, now I live in a place that has a Whole Foods, because before there was a Whole Foods like 4 hours away. I mean, it was unreal, like couldn't ever get to a Whole Foods. Had a Whole Foods, an Earth Fare, all this stuff, no more excuses, and it was kind of like, okay, if I'm going to train as a bodybuilder, then if I could do it 100% vegan, how cool of a, representation of our community would that be if I could say I've done both of these things at the same time. And as I got deeper into that, then it was like, okay, let me educate myself on cruelty-free products and that kind of stuff. And that's such a huge thing that is still a work in progress, to say, okay, I have all these things that I had from before when I didn't know,
right.
And it's like, let's go ahead and use those things up and then make sure that everything I buy from here is good. So that's a big thing, and one of my life goals is actually to adopt one of the Beagle Freedom Project beagles. So because I have a beagle mix now that I've adopted, and their personalities are so great, and I'm just so against the testing that they do that
absolutely.
I would love to have one. So
that's cool. So a Whole Foods 4 hours away. So just a little sidebar here. how well do you think our buddy Jason Morris, little plug for our friend Jason, how well do you think he would do with a Whole Foods 4 hours away? Do you think he would spontaneously combust?
He would be standing like this on the roadside.
Yeah, somebody could call, pick me up if I need a Whole Foods run.
Uber, come and get me, you know? Yeah, he wouldn't
Right.
make it, especially,
Nice.
I mean, the chicken fried tofu.
Exactly.
Like, how can you live without the chicken fried tofu?
How can you live without it?
You can't.
Exactly. I just had some the other night, actually. All right, so that brings you up to going vegan and starting bodybuilding. So this is cool, and I think this is something that we ought to talk about because I know that you were featured in one of those articles, I think, that came out of one of the British online presses or whatever, where it was talking about 12 or 13 bodybuilders. You were one of the ones featured being vegan. And I think, did I send you the link to that podcast where they were talking about all the PhDs were talking about how you can't build muscle and all that kind of stuff. And this is really cool because, I've talked to Jason, I've talked to Justin on the show now, and now you, and all three of you seem to have started your bodybuilding, powerlifting, or strength gaining after you went vegan. So was that the case with you? Because if that's when you started training for bodybuilding, so you didn't have all this muscle, you didn't have all the strength and stuff like that. You did that totally on a plant-based diet, is that correct?
Yeah, because like I said, I started, I guess in the scope of my athletic life, I grew up more doing softball, dance, gymnastics, and I tended to be one of the smaller people. Like when I played softball, I was pretty small. When I moved up in age group, they just stuck me out in the outfield and just kind of whatever. And then, when I did endurance sports, I guess I started that around 2005, started running. And if you're a runner, the lighter, the smaller you are, the more aerodynamic you are, so it makes sense to try to maintain yourself as light as you can. So I never wanted to have, big mass and muscle because it was going to slow me down. Then I guess it was around 2007 to 2010 that I did triathlon and all that kind of stuff. And then 2010 to 2013, I just kind of strength trained, and I'd kind of been thinking like it would be fun to do something on the bodybuilding side, but I definitely wasn't lifting heavy enough to build the muscle. I didn't really, even with a background in exercise science, you have to educate yourself on each of these different sports.
Sure,
so still in my mindset, I'm thinking I was strength training the way that I strength trained to complement my endurance sport, but not, not to build strength, not to build muscle. It was more in the 12 to 15 rep range all the time, straight sets, whatever, total body at one time or whatever, not breaking it into a split and all that kind of stuff. So now that I am fully vegan, it's kind of hard because people will ask, like, what was it like before? And it's like, I don't have anything to compare it to. So it's kind of, I definitely can say the recovery, which is the thing everybody talks about the most, the recovery is through the roof, but if you look at, I'm trying to think of where it's out there. I know there's a couple books and things that I've done that have my initial picture, and my mom is always like, that picture is sad, you need to stop showing that picture on the internet. And I'm like, but Mom, it's so powerful because it shows, like, I literally look like I had little stick arms and everything, and it's like, that's the body that I had, and now this is the body that I built, and it was all on plants.
And I think that's in the plant-based performance book that you co-authored with me. Erin's one of our team members featured in the second plant-based performance book that I put out, which there's about 23 or so of us on there, as well as some other Team Plantbuilt people. But her before and after photos are part of her feature in there, and they are pretty remarkable. So it just shows you that you can definitely build a lot of dense muscle and strength on plants. And a little plug for plant-based performance, I'll put the website down at the bottom, but that down below this video in the notes. But 100% of the sales of those books go to benefit animal welfare. Our first book goes to Mercy for Animals, and the second book that Erin was on with me goes to Animal Legal Defense Fund and a local rescue here in Atlanta, Forgotten Animals Rescue. So definitely check it out. Erin's featured in there, as well as some other amazing vegan athletes. But getting back to that, so you, like I said, you, Justin, Jason, and I know so many vegan, and there certainly are people who were, omnivores, and they were highly competitive, and they built a lot of, so sure, there are people that are, have transitioned, but, if you look at people like Patrick Baboumian or this new guy, this Barney Duplessis, the Mr. Universe, if you look at these guys, they're maintaining and continuing to build strength and muscle on plants. So I mean, if there was any argument to this whole you can't build size on, well, how could you maintain it?
Right.
You know, how can you
Right.
get the nutrients that can maintain muscle mass if you can't build it? It's a bunch of.
There was actually an interview I just read last night with him and his wife about, just how he feels, and just said, energy through the roof, feels so much better. Basically, I wish I would have done this sooner,
Sure.
which is another thing that we hear a lot of vegans say is like, I
I've
wish,
said it,
and I've said it a lot because to go from 2001 to 2013 of vegetarian, there was many times within that I really just should have pushed over and stayed that way. But my favorite part about the one article that I was in was the steroid accusations on the podcast, and
Absolutely.
it's like that. Like, I know that sounds silly, but that was one of my fitness goals, was to be accused of being on steroids, because that means that you're being noticed, that you're really showing, you're putting it in the face of people that don't think it's possible, and of course because of their insecurity they're going to cry, oh, it was, because it's either they weren't vegan when they started, or they're on steroids. That's the only two things
so
they have.
the omnivores aren't eating steroids, though, right? Or using steroids. Using steroids. It's only the vegans. Yeah. And my friend Mike Mahler, who's a longtime vegan for over 20 years now, I think, maybe 30, I don't know, but he does a great podcast, Live Life Aggressively podcast. He's strong, jacked, and stuff like that. And the other thing he hears, oh, well, you guys just drink a bunch of protein powder. And that's a bunch of crap too. Yeah, I mean, some do use protein powder, but it's not like you only get your protein from
and it's not like our plant-based protein has growth hormone in it.
Yeah,
or something
exactly.
Like
Right. So, yeah, the arguments are ridiculous. I mean, just come out and say, yes, you can do this. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to continue eating meat. But yeah, you can. I'd respect them so much more if they wouldn't try to downplay it.
Well, and I mean, the comments clearly show that people don't know the first thing about the sport,
right?
Because they don't understand that most of the federations are drug tested anyway. So it's like, if we really were, it would come out.
And there's people that do be drug tests and stuff like that. But for the most part, I mean, there's tons of natural bodybuilders, whether they're omnivores or vegans, who look amazing and could be accused of doing anabolics, and that's just more of a tribute to the work ethic and the amount of time and stuff that they put into doing this in the years and stuff like that. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, you train day in and day out, year after year after year, to make these, make small gains, the small gains add up over time. But let's talk a little bit about your training. Now that we've kind of talked about the transition of veganism. I know that you've dabbled a little bit with some power lifting and stuff like that. Talk a little bit about your training now and kind of what your initial goals are. I know you got a competition coming up too.
Yeah, so trying to get back on contest prep. It'll happen, in a couple of days. Hoping to take about a 19 to 20 week prep so that I can do women's physique again this year. And with the women's physique division, they really want a lean body type, and it's something that you just can't get away from, because conditioning, that's what they call it, the leanest conditioning, that is key. It's not about who's the biggest, it's not about who has the most muscle necessarily, but it's who can display it the best. So it's going to take a little bit longer to do that. But when I first got into bodybuilding, I definitely see that there's old school versus new school, and I'm sure there's other sports that are that way too. But what I'm finding with what I refer to as the old school is that it's so aesthetic based that it's almost like you don't look at your body as a functioning strength unit. Like, it's like, if I can have a wide lat, I don't care if I'm not even strong enough to do a pull-up. And I thought that was so silly. And I remember after my first show becoming friends with one of the girls I competed with and seeing like a year later where she goes, here's my first pull-up, and I'm like, how did you play so well and you have this great back and you can't pull your own body weight up, and I'm over here with weight on my belt and I still don't have huge lats, So I've never wanted to be the kind of person that just trains for a look. I want to train for function. And then the more that I got into understanding how to squat, bench, deadlift correctly, then I noticed that I can use those to build muscle.
Oh, absolutely.
And that, and at the end of the day, it's all about your total volume. So the heavier weight that I can push, the more times I can push it, the more volume I'm getting, the more growth. So the two sports really do complement each other in that way. And me personally, I like to see how much weight I can lift. So when I keep that in my training of like, let's see how much I can push my numbers up, that's fun for me in my training as well. And it doesn't make it seem like I'm just starving myself to death and getting weak, and it's like, the goal is to try to stay as strong as I can all the way up to the end. And I've actually noticed that a lot of it's mental, because if you tell yourself, oh, I'm 6 or 8 weeks out, I'm eating a lot less than I have been, and I'm hungry and I'm tired, if you tell yourself that, then you're going to be weak. But if you just like oh yay, I got to eat a quarter cup of oatmeal this morning, and I'm gonna have a great time at the gym, and I'm gonna lift
Like I know what you're talking about.
then the mental part can really push you a lot more, you know.
Awesome.
And really, the sport of bodybuilding is the most mental sport ever.
Sure.
You know, because I've trained for long distance triathlons, and you know, it's one thing to ride your bike for like 80 miles, but then you go eat massive amounts of food.
Sure.
You know, and this is like train hard and, you know, watch everything that you put in your mouth. And I live alone, so there's times where I'm like, oh, no one's around.
No one's
like,
yeah.
No one's gonna know.
Right. And, well, you know, you said bodybuilding. You know, it's definitely the most mental or driving. It is, because in Texas, I don't bodybuild. You guys gotta be crazy. You know, so I could definitely attest to that. But what's your favorite lift to do out of? I guess maybe out of the big three, you know, squat, bench, and deadlift. But then if you've got another, you know, pet gym lift that you like to do.
Out of the big three, it's definitely bench. As I said, if anybody saw our little interview when we were at Atlanta Bench Fest, I referred to my T-Rex arms. So I do have a long torso and short limbs, so that does, you know, favor me for bench squat, you know. It seems like deadlift is my weakest. I pull sumo, but, you know, I have these legs that I'm like, surely these legs can like help me pull some more, but for some reason I'm just a strong bencher, and like mentally I'm not afraid of the bench, and I know
that's a big issue,
a lot of women, bench is not their thing, they're afraid of it, and I've seen a lot of people go for a lift and then they just completely
give up. They don't try. Yeah.
Right, and I've never done that. I always grind it out no matter what is
awesome.
going to happen, and you know, squat I'm getting more confident with that too, but definitely bench is something that out of the three, I want to put as much focus as I can into that one, especially because I can do bench only competitions, you know, and
sure.
typically might not see some of the other competitions around. And as far as other lifts,
I know you mentioned weighted pull-ups. Yeah, I mean, there's not many people that do pull-ups.
I hate pull-ups, and see, that's the thing. I hate them. Even as they become slightly easier, they never become much easier. And I think the fact that they're always hard, going back to that mental thing, it's like I force myself to do them mentally, because even when I did triathlon training, I would do like, you know, you do have to train your mind. So it's like if you go outside, you're going to ride your bike and it's a huge headwind. You could go, oh, I'm just going to go inside and ride on my trainer.
Yeah.
But if you push yourself to do that with the wind, then if it's race day and you have wind and you got to do it anyway. So I guess that's how I approach the pull-ups. But back day is probably my favorite day of all. And like I said, I'm trying to get it to widen out and thicken up.
Yeah.
But like, I really enjoy doing back exercises, bent over row, you know, all the pull-down stuff, pull-ups, etc.
You definitely got good development. I remember, you know, on stage and stuff like that. You know, especially you can see in the pictures, your back development's sick. Let's see. So we talked about some nutrition. We talked a little bit. Well, we didn't really talk about nutrition yet. We talked about transition to vegan. Do we want to get into that topic? Should we talk about it a little bit?
I don't know. We could talk about all the wonderful things I've been eating and.
Well, what's a normal contest prep day for you? Because I know a lot of people do it differently. Even in the vegan world, some people do the low carb, high protein. People do the macros. People do the more traditional bodybuilding diet. What's a normal contest prep day like for you?
Okay, well, first of all, shout out to my coach, Danny Taylor, because she is magical when it comes to this stuff. And
Danny's awesome.
You know, definitely people were like, oh, even my mom said this to me over the break. Like, I was telling her that I had just signed up for my next round of prep and, you know, whatever. And she said, well, can't you just do this stuff yourself? And I said, well, I probably could, but the amount of time it would take for me to invest that takes away from my job and training.
Factor too?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly,
you
the accountability, exactly. And so someone to say, an outside perspective to say, here, I see what you look like this week versus last week, this is working, this is not, whatever, you know, I can give concerns and she'll address them and whatever. But I made it very clear from the beginning that I don't want to focus on the numbers. I don't want to get obsessed about how many calories I'm eating and how many grams I'm eating and whatever. And I was actually just telling Scott before we started filming that when I noticed when I pull the plan up on my phone, I don't see any of the numbers, and I just see what I'm supposed to eat and whatever. So I do carb cycling. That's something we started a couple years ago, and it seems to work well physically and mentally, because if you're doing, you know, gradually lower carbs, but you have a day where you get to eat more, you can look forward to that. So instead of being like, oh, and that goes back to old school versus new school, because old school is low carb all the time, and then you get these zombies that can't function and they can't think and they like are miserable, and then when they do get a chance to get their hands on food, it's all over, you know?
Sure.
So at least when you have that balance of higher and lower carb, and I've actually found I'm more of a fat vegan. Like, I love fat.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the low carb days I'm cool with because I want my avocado and
Yeah.
all that other stuff. But it's, you know, pretty plain. There's a protein, a carbohydrate, and a fat pretty much at every meal. And
What's your favorite contest
really,
prep meal?
I enjoy my breakfast and my dessert probably similarly. I usually do like a chocolate tofu pudding for dessert.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean,
And that's like contest prep legit.
Yes,
Awesome.
yes.
Yeah.
It's like half a block of silken tofu. If you've never tried this, as much cocoa as you want, and then I found that putting salt on it, you know, then you get the salted chocolate kind of thing. It's so amazing. Throw it in the food processor and you're done. And that's
Awesome.
you know, that's something that really does feel and taste like dessert all the way through.
So that's got to help us psychologically too,
Yeah,
a little bit,
it
being
does.
able to eat stuff like that.
Yeah, and it really, I've found that the trick is really how much effort you put into being creative. So like if you find, you know, if you're supposed to eat 2 cups of vegetables, well, it's up to you to figure out which vegetables you want
Right.
to eat. Because if you're, you know, like I have a love-hate with kale. And, you know, any of my things that I eat on contest prep that I'm not really a fan of, I just don't really eat them when I'm off. So like I haven't
Sure.
been eating kale because I'm not really a fan. I eat a ton of grapefruit on contest prep. I do like them, but they can be extreme. So
Yeah.
like, haven't touched a grapefruit in a while, you know. But when it comes down to the vegetable, it's like if you figure out which spices you like the best, which preparation you like the best, then that's really the ultimate thing that's going to get you through. And I've seen not vegan competitors versus vegan competitors. This is where it really stands out
Yeah.
because it's like non-vegan competitors think the only vegetable that exists is broccoli. I
Right.
mean, literally, it's like no other vegetable exists. And then on peak week, asparagus.
Right, well,
But,
I was
you know,
going to say, you got Giacomo and Christian and their 25 heads of asparagus.
which costs so much if you've never bought asparagus.
And the smell in that room, man, it was like asparagus, protein, and urine. It was awful.
Yeah, so that's when it definitely, like, when I get to the end of contest prep, it's like, wow, I feel really sorry for these other people that are eating 3 ounces of tilapia and broccoli with no seasoning on it and, you know, brown rice, and that's the only thing they eat.
It's brutal, man. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think I could do it, or should I just give it up?
Oreos.
Yeah, right?
Just eat all the Oreos.
Nice.
You'll be
So,
fine.
how about non-contest prep, you know, kind of off-season, maybe less than healthy food, without getting straight into the Oreos? Like,
Right.
what's your favorite type of meal off-season?
Well, I love to cook, like absolutely love to. I'm a recipe hoarder, and I tend to be a one and done type of person with my recipes, and I have so many. So I'll like find something new, make it. Actually, have all sorts of folders on my computer. It's
I
quite
bet.
obsessive, but
She
there's like,
can bake too. The cupcakes at Veg
yes,
Fest were
I love
insane.
baking.
Yeah.
I love cooking. So you know, it's all variety. But one thing I've done this year that's different from the other years is I said I like fat and I do like carbs, but I tend to, unless I'm really aware of it, I won't eat a lot of protein on my own. Like I just would eat carbs, fat, whatever. So I did try to, throughout the off season, just kind of sneak protein here and there. So if that means baking a cake or whatever and putting some protein powder in it, then that's what I would do. Or if I had a recipe that was for a soup, throw in half a block of tofu, you know, that kind of thing.
Cool.
So I think that helped me out a little bit. And one of the most amazing things that I have learned recently, if you guys have not tried this, so mug cakes are very popular, where it's, you know, a little bit of flour and baking powder and non-dairy milk of choice and put it in the microwave for a minute and it makes a cake. Okay, so that, first time I did that, it was like, I don't understand, you're supposed to bake a cake for 30 minutes, how can you do this in a minute?
Yeah.
So when I did that for the first time, it was like, boom. So then someone on Instagram goes, well, have you heard of it's called the belt sander brownie? I don't know, yeah. So I'm like, okay, this has got to be some super weighed up kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
So then it was like, well, you can do the vegan version. All you do is take a scoop of protein powder, a little, like a quarter teaspoon of baking powder, and then water or non-dairy milk, stir it up the same way that you would a mug cake, and cook it. And I tell you, it's like cake.
Wow.
So if you want a literal protein cake, then you're not wasting any of the carbs in there, and you can load the carbs on top. That's where it's at. So
I'm starving.
or the fat or whatever you put on there. Because I was doing, I made my own chocolate bar over Christmas, and I did like the little protein cake which basically is just a base. I mean, it's not even about that part, it's about the topping. So then you put the chocolate on and then cocoa whip, so
Nice.
yeah, but
Sounds awesome.
yeah, so really, I mean, when it comes to off season, anything that I'm interested in,
Yeah.
I want. And
Nice.
and I definitely have the kind of approach toward food of, if it's something that I have never had or I won't have access to again, I'm going to try it. And then once I've had it, I don't have to have it again. You know,
Yeah.
like I don't know if other people are that way or not, but like for example, the raspberry cream filled whoopie pies from the Piping Gourmet, I had the mint. I knew those were great. I don't need those again, but raspberry I had not tried, so I had to get those before I left on vacation. And they're good too, but I'll never need them again because now I know.
This is a perfect segue into the infamous stash.
Oh, the stash.
So I didn't know what the stash was until our first year together down at in Austin at Plantbuilt. She kept talking about the stash. I'm like, what the is the mustache? What's the stash? You know, what is she talking about?
Question.
Yeah. So tell us about the infamous stash, because you had it in 14 and you had it in 2015.
Yeah.
So
and
what is the stash?
Okay. Well, the stash is another level of hoarding, I guess we could say, a healthy level of hoarding. So I do a lot of baking for my students in my program, because when I first came to teaching at Greenville Tech, there was really very little exposure to veganism at all. So it was like, you know, we teach there's protein, and it would never include other protein sources that are plant-based, or they were still on that whole incomplete proteins. So you know, I've come in and debunked that and everything. So I bake them stuff, and I usually will not only have a vegan recipe, but I'll slash as many calories as I can. So if I use stevia instead of sugar, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I do that on a regular basis. So if I'm making a batch of cupcakes, I'm not going to take all that time, energy, and money and then give it all away. I'm going to save one for myself. So I figure, like I said, I live alone. I have a full freezer. I have a pantry, whatever. So I just
And she fills them.
Yeah, I just
She fills them. Yeah.
start stashing stuff away. And unfortunately, this past year when I finally broke into the stash, some of the stuff spoiled, and it practically broke my heart. So for this year, it might change a little bit. There might be either different stash items, ones that won't spoil, or I might have to just dip into the stash a little bit along the way and do a little bit of treating. I don't know.
Macros.
Yeah, but but yeah, the stash is basically just like, if you could imagine your most fantastical dream of all the vegan things that you could want, I pretty much had them.
Yeah, the pictures were amazing. When
And
she
I
started
wasn't
showing
really
the pictures,
sharing.
yeah, they're pretty good. Yeah, no. You could lose an arm going near
Yeah,
that, from
don't
what I
get between
understand.
me and my stash.
All right, well, so we talked a little bit about training, competition, we talked a little bit about nutrition, your switch to vegan. Before we wrap it up here, why is it important for people to consider adopting a plant-based and eventually vegan lifestyle? What in your opinion or your thoughts, or, you know, I mean, I know this is very personal to some people and stuff like that. Why, in your words, is it important for people to consider, you know, adopting a vegan lifestyle? Why is it important for you, for the environment?
Well, and see,
Animals.
like, my outlook on it seems to change. Like, it seems like I'll fixate on one thing that's so important about it, and honestly, the thing that upsets me the most is when I see the undercover footage that we see of people just being, you know, complete sadistic, crazy psycho people. Because how do you know when you're just out and about that you're not near one of those people, and they're obviously so desensitized to what they're doing that they could commit violence on you? Or, I mean, it's unreal. And I think that's something that people never think about, is that, you know, when I read up on like the Hormel thing with the high speed, you know, of course when I first start look at it, it's like, oh, those people are just awful people, whatever. But then the more that I'll read into it, those are people doing their job, and someone above them is telling them that they have to kill so many pigs at such a quick rate. And there's people saying, we're not doing this right, that one's still alive going down the line. And it's like, that was the first time that I kind of flipped it to where it was like, well, those people are just trying to make money to survive, and there's someone above them that they're supposed to trust that's telling them to do this, you know. So just the whole fact that people have to be subjected to that is awful, you know. So the less demand there is for that, the less people are going to be needed to do those kind of jobs. But even, you know, I know it sounds morbid, but I sit and think of, like, when I'm older, like, I I don't even know what this world's going to be like, because it's not heading in the best direction. So it's kind of like, if you have children, if you want there to be any kind of planet for them, this is one of the basic steps that you could do. And the plant-based lifestyle opens so many other things, because all the vegans I know do care about the environment in other ways. So we conserve utilities, and we recycle, and we do other things. So I think it opens your perspective to what are all the things that I can do to decrease my impact on the world. And I know that some of us are more compassionate toward humans than others. A lot of us, like, I'm probably more of a I love animals more than people kind of person, but
that's why we get along so well.
It's it still kind of opens to, like, you do want to create the least harm to the least living being.
Sure.
So I mean, if I had to adopt any type of philosophy, I think utilitarianism would be, it's like you're just trying to live a life that you enjoy, but yet creating the least harm for everything else. And
awesome.
I mean, the fact that it's just so easy to do, I mean, it really, day by day it becomes easier. I mean, I haven't gotten my hands on the vegan egg yet. I know a lot of you have, and I'm kind of jealous, but not in this part of the country yet, but really daily we're seeing more exposure. It's easier, and one time I had someone say to me, I'm sure you get this too, of like, that must be so hard. That must be so hard. And my response was, it's not hard at all when you're doing something that you believe in. I mean, it's just like anything else. If you're any kind of minority, if you're the person who is thinking something that's different from the crowd, but it's something you believe in, that doesn't make it hard at all to stand for whatever it is, whether it be a religious belief or eating style or whatever. So.
Awesome. Well, I think it's about time to bring this one in for a landing.
Right.
Thanks so much to my good friend and teammate Erin Fergus for coming all the way down, not just to hang out with me to eat donuts. We saw what the real motivation was here, which we're about to go have. Massive shout out to Revolution Donuts in Decatur, Georgia. Thank you for providing such awesome vegan donuts, and if you're in the area, be sure to check them out. That wraps up this week's Strength and Health TV. Until next week, stay strong and stay healthy. Thanks, Erin.